I sat in my corner office at Summit Publishing House, holding my sister Madeline's manuscript in my hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, she'd stood in our parents' living room, mocking my dreams of becoming a writer. Now her first novel sat on my desk, awaiting my decision as owner of one of the largest publishing houses in the country. She had no idea, of course. To my family, I was still Emma Parker, the failed writer who disappeared to find herself in New York. They thought I was probably waiting tables somewhere, too proud to admit defeat. They didn't know I'd built a publishing empire worth hundreds of millions while they weren't looking. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Parker, your sister is calling again. She wants to know if there's any update on her manuscript. Tell her the same thing we tell all authors. The review process takes time." I opened the manuscript again, skimming through the pages I'd already read twice. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. The kind of middling first novel that would have been rejected even if the author wasn't my sister. 5 years earlier, another rejection letter. Madeline's voice dripped with fake sympathy as I checked my mail. "How many is that now?" I stood in our parents' kitchen, holding the thin envelope from yet another literary agent. At 25, I'd spent 2 years trying to get my first novel published while working as a bookstore clerk to pay bills. 15, I admitted quietly. But Stephen King got rejected 27 times before. "Oh, stop," she rolled her eyes. "You're not Stephen King. You're just wasting your time with these silly stories while the rest of us have real careers." My mother looked up from her coffee. "Madeline's right, dear. Maybe it's time to consider something more practical. Your cousin David's law firm is always hiring." I carefully folded the rejection letter and tucked it away. "I'm not giving up. I know I can make it in publishing." Publishing. My father's voice boomed as he entered the kitchen. "The entire industry is dying. E-books, Amazon. No one reads real books anymore. If only they could see my company's profit margins now." "I have a plan," I said. "I've been researching the industry, studying market trends. There's still room for innovation in publishing." Madeline laughed. "Innovation? You can barely work the TV remote. Leave the business stuff to people who understand it." I didn't bother explaining that I'd spent months analyzing publishing industry reports, studying successful independent presses, and developing a business plan while they thought I was just writing stories in my room. "At least Madeline has a real job," my mother sighed. "Public relations is a growing field." Yes, public relations. Where my sister spent her days writing press releases about corporate mergers while believing it made her a better writer than me. That night, I made a decision. I packed my bags, withdrew my life savings of $15,000, and bought a bus ticket to New York. My family thought I was running away from failure. In reality, I was running towards something much bigger than they could imagine. The first year was brutal. I took any job I could find in publishing: intern, copy editor, proofreader. I worked 16-hour days, learning every aspect of the industry from the ground up. At night, I refined my business plan. I changed my professional name, using my mother's maiden name, Parker, to avoid any connection to my family. Every time they sent messages mocking my escape to New York, I channeled that energy into building something extraordinary. The breakthrough came when I discovered a manuscript in the slush pile at the small press where I was working. While everyone else passed it over, I saw its potential. I used my savings to option the rights, then found investors who shared my vision. That book became a global phenomenon, selling millions of copies. Suddenly, Summit Publishing wasn't just another small press. We were the hottest new player in the industry. I kept my identity hidden, working through carefully constructed corporate veils. The publishing world was full of old money and established names. Being a young woman who'd built her company from nothing would only invite extra scrutiny. I watched from afar as my family continued to dismiss my career choice. Each snide comment about giving up on writing fueled my determination. Each patronizing suggestion about real jobs pushed me to work harder. By year 3, Summit Publishing had acquired 3 major literary agencies and 2 smaller publishing houses. We had offices in New York, London, and Toronto. The mysterious Ms. Parker was being hailed as a visionary in publishing. Still, I maintained my cover. When I visited home for holidays, I wore simple clothes and avoided questions about my work. I let them believe I was struggling while my actual net worth soared past 9 figures. Now, 5 years after leaving home, I sat in my corner office holding my sister's manuscript. Madeline had been trying to break into publishing for months, sending her novel to every major house in the country. She had no idea that Summit Publishing, the company she most wanted to impress, was owned by the sister she'd mocked for years. My phone buzzed. A text from our mother. Madeline's book is being reviewed by Summit Publishing. Can you believe it? A real publishing house. When are you going to give up this writing nonsense and come home? I set the phone aside without responding and turned back to the manuscript. The rejection letter was already drafted, the same form letter we sent to thousands of aspiring authors each year. But I hadn't signed it yet. My assistant knocked softly. Miss Parker, the board meeting about the merger starts in 10 minutes, and your sister has called 3 more times. I stood up, straightening my designer suit, worth more than Madeline's annual salary. Tell the board I'll be right there. I paused, looking at the manuscript one last time, and send out the rejection letter. The standard form letter? No, I sat down and pulled out a piece of paper. I think this one deserves a personal touch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't rejecting someone. It's making them face exactly why they're being rejected. And tomorrow, when the publishing industry's biggest story broke, my family would learn exactly what their failed writer had been doing all these years. The morning my identity was set to be revealed, I sat in my office carefully crafting the rejection letter for Madeline's manuscript. Not the standard form letter we sent to thousands of hopeful authors, but something more personal. Dear Ms. Taylor, thank you for submitting Midnight in Manhattan to Summit Publishing. I've read your manuscript with particular attention, given our shared background. While your writing shows technical competence, the story lacks the emotional depth and authenticity that Summit Publishing requires. Your protagonist's journey feels superficial, perhaps because you're writing about a world you've only observed from the outside. The publishing industry scenes, in particular, demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of how this business actually works. I encourage you to write about what you truly know, rather than attempting to criticize a world you've never been part of. Perhaps there's a story in public relations. Sincerely, Emma Parker, owner and CEO, Summit Publishing House. I sealed the letter just as my assistant knocked. Miss Parker, the Wall Street Journal article is live. I opened my laptop to read the headline that would change everything. Publishing's mystery queen revealed. How Emma Taylor built a literary empire in secret. The article was perfect. Detailed coverage of how I transformed a small investment into one of the industry's most influential publishing houses. My journey from rejected writer to industry powerhouse. The strategic acquisitions, the bestsellers we discovered, the innovations we'd brought to a traditional industry. My phone started buzzing immediately. I watched as familiar names flashed across the screen. Mom, Dad, various relatives. Madeline's name appeared 6 times in the first minute alone. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I opened my email to find exactly what I expected, dozens of messages from family members who'd spent years mocking my career choice. Aunt Patricia, who'd once told me I was too plain to be a creative, now wanted to discuss her grandson's children's book ideas. Cousin David, who persistently offered me filing jobs at his law firm, was suddenly interested in publishing his legal memoirs. Delete, delete, delete. Then came the message I'd been waiting for. Madeline's response to her rejection letter. How dare you? Do you know who I am? My sister? Well, my sister used to be a writer. She'd tell you my work is brilliant if she wasn't too proud to admit she failed in New York. I smiled and pressed the intercom. Claire, please send in the photographers from Publishers Weekly. It's time for my official portrait as Summit's CEO. And your family? She asked cautiously. They called 16 times in the last hour. Tell them I'm in a meeting. Actually, I am in a meeting with Success. I had just finished the photo shoot when my office door burst open. Madeline stood there, face flushed, clutching the rejection letter in one hand and a copy of the Wall Street Journal in the other. You, she sputtered. All this time, you were the owner of Summit Publishing? I finished smoothly. The failed writer who built a $300 million company? Yes, that would be me. She stumbled forward, collapsing into one of my visitor chairs. But you never said anything. All these years, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I said, sitting behind my desk. You all decided I was a failure because I didn't follow your prescribed path to success. It never occurred to you that I might be building something extraordinary. My manuscript, she whispered. You personally rejected my manuscript. I did, because it wasn't good enough. I held up my hand as she started to protest. Not because you're my sister, because it wasn't ready. Summit Publishing maintains certain standards regardless of who submits the work. But I'm your sister. Yes, the same sister who mocked my dreams, who called my writing silly, who spent years telling me to face reality. Well, Madeline, this is reality. I own one of the most successful publishing houses in the country. What have you done with your writing? The door opened again, this time revealing our parents, both looking shell-shocked. Emma, my mother breathed. We've been trying to call you. I've been busy, I said coolly, running my company, building my empire. You know, all those things you said I couldn't do. My father stepped forward, his face a mixture of shame and attempted authority. Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Really? I stood up, gesturing to the wall of bestsellers Summit had published. Was I family when you told me to give up on my dreams? When you said the publishing industry was dying? When you spent 5 years treating me like a cautionary tale? We were worried about you, my mother tried. We just wanted you to have a secure future. I laughed. A secure future? Look around, Mom. I own this building. I have offices in 3 countries. My company just acquired our largest competitor for $150 million. Is that secure enough for you? Madeline held up her rejection letter. Did you have to be so cruel? Cruel? I raised an eyebrow. Like telling someone their dreams are silly is cruel. Like mocking someone's passion is cruel. I gave you a professional critique of your work. The fact that it hurts is because it's true. But we're family, she repeated weakly. Family supports each other, I said quietly. Family believes in each other's dreams. Family doesn't tear each other down. You all forgot that. I didn't. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Parker, the New York Times is here for your interview. Send them in. I replied, then turned back to my family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run. Claire will show you out. Emma, please. My mother stepped forward. We were wrong. So wrong. Can't we talk about this? I looked at them, really looked at them. My mother's designer dress that suddenly seemed shabby compared to my office's quiet elegance. My father's attempt to maintain his patriarchal authority in a space where he had none. Madeline's dawning realization that her failed sister was now her superior in every way she'd once claimed mattered. You want to talk? I picked up Madeline's manuscript. Let's talk about writing. Let's talk about how you all dismissed this industry as dying while I was revolutionizing it. Let's talk about how the silly stories you mocked have built an empire. We're proud of you, my father said quickly. So proud? No, I cut him off. You're proud of my success. There's a difference. You still don't understand what I actually built here. I walked to my wall of bestsellers, touching the spines gently. I didn't just build a profitable company. I built a place where new voices can be heard, where stories matter, where dreams like mine aren't dismissed just because they don't fit someone else's definition of success. The door opened and the New York Times reporter entered. I turned to my family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an interview about how a failed writer transformed the publishing industry. After they left, I sat at my desk, looking out over the New York skyline. My phone was still buzzing with messages from relatives suddenly remembering my existence. Literary agents who'd rejected me years ago now wanted meetings. Former classmates claimed they'd always believed in me. I deleted them all. My assistant brought in my afternoon coffee, served in a mug that read, "Success is the best revenge." Your sister left her manuscript, Claire said. Should I dispose of it? I looked at the pages that had started this revelation. No, send it back to her with a note. Writing about what you know means being honest with yourself first. Try that, then try writing again. And the dinner invitation from your parents? I thought about it for a moment. Tell them to submit it through proper channels, like everyone else does. The New York Times reporter was set up in my conference room, ready to tell my story to the world. But the real story wasn't about revenge or even success. It was about believing in yourself when no one else would, about building something meaningful while others mocked your dreams. I straightened my jacket and headed to the interview. Let them read about the empire I'd built while they weren't looking. Let them finally understand what they dismissed all those years ago. Sometimes the best success isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself so right that their opinions become irrelevant. and I had a whole publishing house full of proof.